All right, guys, we're gonna get started. Hope you all had a borderline okay weekend. So getting into this week, just one housekeeping, which is assignment. So we have an assignment due this week. Assignments are usually due Monday night, but we decided to push this up to Tuesday night just because we were a little late on uploading the assignment and uploading the lecture files. So assignment isn't due tonight, it's just due tomorrow night. So we just extended it one day. And yeah, there's also going to be an assignment assigned today. Any questions on the assignment that's assigned already or anything related? Cool, all right. And then the word of the day is the 100 emoji. Cool.
Hey guys. Okay, so hey. All right, so just to go over a little bit what we went over last week, we really focused on layout and getting the actual right layout in place in your designs. So we went over hierarchy, size, space, alignment, and then also font size and weight. And we're gonna hit on those things again today a little bit, but we're mostly gonna be focusing on color and type. So now we're finally getting into even more so the visual design part of your apps and your designs. So last week, this is where we were. We're kind of in between usable and delightful, and more kind of leading towards delightful. But even this week, we're going to be hitting the delightful scale even more so. And again, what makes design delightful? It's beautiful, it's genuine, it's funny, the details matter, and it just feels right. And we're going to be really hitting mostly today on the beautiful part and the details matter part, and also just feeling right. Okay, and again, going back to what we said last week, we want to make sure with our visual design that we're going to have a consistent look and feel throughout the whole thing. And you're going to be able to do that with color and typography throughout your whole app and your product. And the other part is, don't forget, and this is how we've been harping on this the whole semester, is keep making sure it's easy to use and still understandable. So without further ado, let's get into color. Okay, so I showed these last week. These are examples of Snapchat and how they use or have the same layout throughout the different screens. But also, I wanted to point out that their use of color. And we're going to be getting a little bit more into that in a moment. But I wanted to first hit on emphasis. So going back to the definition of hierarchy, it's showing what's most important on the screen visually. So using emphasis, people can use color as a proxy for emphasis. And you can change other things to create emphasis too, like we said, like hierarchy and size, etc. But emphasis helps create a focal point and bring attention to what's most important in your design. So here's a couple of examples. And this will be kind of very similar to last week, where I'm going to show you guys a bunch of visual examples this way. So on the left is an app called Medium. I talked about it a little bit last week. It's a news, I guess it's like a news app that anybody can post on. And they have this big, bright green section that's drawing your eye and says, hey, I want you to actually follow your interest in my app. So they use that bright green block of color to draw your eye and attention to that. And on the other example is Pinterest, and they're trying to say, hey, you have nothing here, you have no messages yet. This is what you can do. You can actually send a message, and it's trying to draw your eye to that using that really bright yellow color. So here's the Google Maps example that I used last week, which we were talking about with hierarchy. But today I want to focus more on the color aspects. So it uses a bright blue color as their primary color. And on the one on the left, it's that circle at the bottom. It's trying to get you to click on that in case you don't have something to search for. Or so you don't need to search. You just go to the screen on the right and you already type in your address. And at the top, it's using blue again to say, hey, here's like your focal point of this actual screen right here. This is where you can type in the address of where you are and where you're going. Also, I want you guys to do this other thing. It's called a squint test. So I want you to just be like, Mr. Krabs last week. He had this little squinting eye. It's a little bit different. You're gonna go like this, like squint at the screen and notice that you're just gonna mostly see blue, right? Yeah, that's what I see when I squint and I can't see anything else. Everything's mostly a sea of white and gray, and the blue really pops out. Again, here's Google again using blue to emphasize a section of the screen. And so this is a different app. This is called their Gboard. They love throwing G's in front of everything they have instead of a keyboard. So they're trying to get you to say, hey, look, tap here to search and send. And this would be like restaurant, whatever. They're giving you examples of how to use it too. So you can use the eye, you can use color to draw your eye to instructions as well within an app. So again, coming back to the Pinterest example from last week, Pinterest really uses their color purposefully in the app, so it's very light colors except for the actual showing of the pins or different information, and then that alert at the bottom. So let's get into what color actually means. So color can actually be used to signify feedback in an app like this. So a lot of times you're going to see green kind of means success, yes, check mark, you did it, great job. Yellow can kind of mean warning, caution, or hey, this is like a notification, take a look at this. And then red is most of the time signifies error in an app. Just kind of like on a traffic light, you know, red means stop, yellow means hey, slow down, and green means go. So here's another example of how you could, these are actual, what are these called? Notification bars. I can't remember exactly the term. Yeah, something like that. Where it's like, hey, you just did something? Okay, green, that means you uploaded something successfully. Yellow, hey, you closed your account, so you probably actually can't even use this app. Error, something terrible happened. Hopefully not, but these guys are being dramatic. And then there's this other notion of, there's this guy, his name's Luke W. He wrote a book about how to have what the best practices in form design are. And so throughout, when you're actually having a user fill out a login form or a sign-up form or something like that, you want to help them figure out, okay, am I entering my information correctly or not? And also, so you can use color to do that. Say, okay, this Edward Elric at whatever. Okay, this is like an email that's actually working so far. But the password is wrong. So with what Luke W. says, he's like, you should use inline validation, so assistance, that's the green color and the red color. Using red for errors. You can also use color for progress to show, okay, I've gotten through all these steps, and also success. So color can also be used to relate or group related items. And going back to the Snapchat example and the email app example on iPhone, what do you guys notice? You guys should probably know this, right? Because you use Snapchat. What does that pink solid color represent in Snapchat? Huh? Unread. Unread, okay. What else does it represent? What? Does it represent, it's a photo, right? And same with the purple. Purple means it's a video, but if it's not filled in, right, that means I've already read it. Same goes to the email example. The blue circle means, okay, I haven't read this yet. Take a look. And no blue circle means I've read it. So there's this app that used to be around. I don't know if any of you guys heard of it. It was called Mailbox, and it was really, really cool. People like me and Sam used to like it. Our other coworker Jason liked it. It's help you get to inbox zero. And if you're ever out there in the working world, which all of you guys will be, you'll be getting tons of emails all the time, and your goal is to get rid of all your emails and be in inbox zero so you don't have to deal with it all. So that's what this app used to do. Going back to the actual point. So the whole using colors to relate to group-related items. They kind of go back to also the color meaning, where the X, that red X means, okay, I'm going to trash this item. What you used to do is you would do a long swipe on your phone in that actual email section to delete an item. You would do a short swipe to say, okay, I read this, which was green at the top. And then you would do a short swipe to the left to snooze it. Okay, I'm going to read it later, which was yellow, which doesn't really mean a warning thing. And then you could do a long swipe to, I can't remember that one. I can't see it. Oh yeah, put it in your own different list. Yeah, I just wanted to show you how it worked in real life too. So that long swipe was green, that means short swipe was green, I read it. Long swipe was red, and it deleted it for me. So their app is purposefully very colorless until you actually take any action. Okay, colors can also help signify different states and conditions of your app. So what I mean by states and conditions, so you see this is a PayPal example for logging in. See on the left where it says, it's like the button where it's a disabled color, or sorry, it looks disabled, it's because it actually is, and it's telling the user, hey, you need to put this information in order for you to move forward. So you can use color like that to signify telling a user if they can or can't do something at the moment. You can also use color to show something if it's selected or not. So here in this example, it's using this white container to show, hey, I selected 6 to 10. It's also giving me that blue check mark along with it, and the button is enabled at the bottom. So it's showing me, okay, I selected all this, the other ones I didn't select. It's helping me focus on my choice. Color can also be used with branding, and this is probably what you guys see for the most part right now and comprehend that the most. So I used Quora. Imad actually used to work at Quora over the summer as an intern. And they use red throughout their app because that's their main color is red. And that's like it's called the primary color. So that's one example. Also Kayak, their main color is orange. You can see that it's kind of woven in. This is just the very first part of their homepage, but you can see it in their logo, you can see it in their illustrations, you can see it in the link, or those icons, and even the search button color. And one more example is Trello. So Trello is an organizational team app to know what you guys are doing within your team, and they use blue throughout a lot of their I'm pretty sure their whole app is mostly blue. Color can also be used to help display data. So this right here is this website is called Color Brewer, and this woman named Cynthia Brewer started it to help figure out, to help show people different ways that they could represent data on a map like this. And what you're seeing here is a diverging color scale is what it's called. So it's to help you show a range of color from either like low to high or light to dark, etc. But it's also using different hues. But this might be a little too soon. Sorry, don't be mad. This is an example of a categorical or qualitative color scale. So it's obviously red meant Trump and blue meant Hillary, and we're all fine. We'll be okay. But I just wanted to show you that this is a colored data example. And this is an example actually from farm logs. So we use a color scale we actually do this thing called, we give our farmers satellite images of their fields to show them things that are going on in their field that they would not know unless they're in their field. And these fields are very, very big. They can be 100 to 500 acres large. So even more so differentiating than that, but that gives you an example. So on the left, this is an example of, again, a diverging color scale. Red means that it's low vegetation. That means there's low growth in that area. Green, when it's a greenish point, means a high vegetation. That means there's a lot of good growth in that area. So you can see the different red marks on each of those maps. And the one on the left, it's pretty interesting. We asked this farmer, okay, why? Like we see that something's happening here. This is pretty abnormal from what normally happens on your field. What's happening there? And he told us, oh, a lot of deer eat my plants over there. So it kind of helped us show the farmer, okay, look, this is proof that satellite imagery shows growth. On the right is an example of a planter configuration problem, which sounds more complicated than it is. The actual machine that actually put the seeds into the ground had a problem. So you can see all those little dots around the edge is showing that issue. So using contrast with color. It's pretty self-explanatory. You can see on the on the left, it's either, there can be really high contrast, which most people usually think is black and white, this yin and yang symbol. But on the right is a low contrast. These are both warm colors. Orange and red are really close to each other on the color wheel. I'm about to show you that in a second. But it's really hard and difficult to distinguish the difference between those two when they're near each other. So if you're having a user do one or two different things near each other, you want whatever is going to be more important to be standing out. So you want to have more of a contrasting color. And this is another kind of weird example of contrast, but this to me on the left kind of looks all the same, just like other than the text being the main contrast differentiator. On the right it's showing me, okay, big sale. Okay, this draws my eye, that red color, it's really bright. Also that click here button, it's like, okay, maybe I'm more inclined to click there because I can see that very quickly right off the bat. Okay, so anybody, maybe I shouldn't ask because I don't want to make you raise your hand or anything, but we're going to address color blindness with your apps. So if you can see these colors on the left, or so the numbers in the circles on the left, it means you're not colorblind, but on the right, if you can see them on the left, then you're not colorblind, but if you cannot see them on the left, then you might be colorblind. So I hope I didn't make you guys figure that out today. That'd be kind of hard to deal with, but it's all good. So for people who are colorblind, they can still see color, but it's a limited range of color. So they're able, out of like a 24-pack pencil package, they can see identify 5 colors out of that correctly. And the most common form is a red-green colorblindness, but there are other forms across the spectrum. And color alone that is used to distinguish between important items or states can pose an issue. So you see how on the bottom, at least the second one and the third one, those first 4 colors, we all know they're different colors, but they just look like different shades or tints to a person who is colorblind. It's also hard to tell the difference if they are very similar in color temperature. So warmer colors together all look the same, cooler colors kind of all look the same. So you want to try and have a high contrast between the colors you choose. So you can also use, in addition to different colors, you can use patterns for people who are colorblind to distinguish between different things. So Trello actually has a colorblind mode where they place a pattern over the top of the colors that are used to distinguish between the different items in its app. And like I just said, we already get the contrast rate. So yeah, I already said that, pick complementary colors. So colors that are across each other on the color wheel. And the other cool, actually I'm gonna skip this part. We might wanna, so these are colors that you should avoid if you're trying to choose colors for people who are, colors that are more accessible. But these are kind of colors you don't want to choose anyway. They're not really great together. They're like we said, there's not a lot of contrast between them. And I would say even just, they don't look good together in terms of taste either. Like green and red next to each other, you think of Christmas a little bit. Green and gray, they have a lot of similar, like a similar light, like a darkness to it, so it's hard to see. Same with green and black. Blue and green, really hard to see up against each other. Blue and purple is too similar, etc. So just go over what some color basics. So just so that you guys understand what these are. We're gonna go over what hue, saturation, and lightness are. So hue is just the actual color itself, picked from the color spectrum at the top. Saturation is the intensity of the color. So how much color that color actually has. It's kind of meta. And then there's lightness. So it's like how bright or how dark the color is. So as a person who's choosing color, you guys can set all these different values to work with each other. But I like to do this where I pick the hue first, and then I hit the saturation, and I leave it kind of there. It's like, okay, I know I want it to be this saturated, and then I'll play around with the lightness value. So this is just an example of how you can see how color has been picked using the hue, the saturation, and the lightness. And also there's this other term, it's called alpha, or it's transparency or opacity. So you can use transparency or opacity to do certain things with the app. Like it's usually, I don't use it too often, but there's this one way I would actually use it. So you see on the left, it's kind of hard to read all those, like I know Thanksgiving's about to happen and I'm making you guys really hungry, but it's really hard to see and differentiate between what the text is actually saying on top of those images. So what I did on the right was add a little bit of a transparent overlay to see that text a little bit better over the top of the images, and I can still see the images. So really quick, I wanted to show how this works in real life. Actually, I might skip this because we're kind of running out of time. Yeah. All right, let me go back to this. Yeah. Okay. So, well, that's cool. Okay, so this is an HSL color picker, and you guys will have this all in Sketchend and Figma, and you can play around with this, but this is just to show a quick example. So I'm going to play around with the hue. Somebody pick a color for me. Anybody? Green? Okay. Let's pick, this is a pretty nice green. Actually, I like this green. You see how the lightness is at about 50%, and it's very saturated over here. If I bring it down, it's a little bit more muted, right? Even bringing the lightness up can mute it a little bit more too. So the lightness is adding more white to it, and at this spectrum, on this end, and it's adding more black to it. It's on this end. This is the actual opacity part, the alpha part. So you guys might see this a lot, which is like RGBA, and the A stands for alpha, as you can see right here.
Can you do brown?
I can do, oh yeah, let's see, brown. It's closer to the red color, and it's going to be darker, and probably a little more saturated. Maybe not. Maybe I want it to be more chocolate. It's hard to see on these screens. Okay, I'll go back. Anybody have any questions on that? No? Okay. Going to... Okay. So different color combinations. Here is your classic color wheel. It's comprised of the three primary colors, which is yellow, red, and blue, and then all the different hues that live between those primary colors. So one way you can actually create a color palette is this way. It's called monochromatic, and it's just basically just picking one color and picking the different shades of color that are all you're doing is changing basically the lightness of the color when it's a monochromatic palette. For analogous, this means it's just the different colors that are close to each other on the actual color wheel, and it's supposed to communicate consistency and uniformity within design. It's relatively easy to work with since there isn't like a huge change in the hue. And you can see that kind of on the right. Starts with this nice like cool mint color, goes down to this cool like limey green, bright yellow color. And then there's, like we said before, complementary colors. So those are colors on the opposite ends of the color wheel. And they're really vibrant when they're used, like when these types of colors are used together. And it helps, it helps create a really nice contrast, like we said earlier. So the actual picking colors part, this is the fun part. So thinking back to what we just went over, what colors do you actually want to use? Are they going to have a visual impact and draw your eye to those certain areas that you've designated that are important to look at on the screen? Are they accessible? So that goes back to the whole colorblindness aspect. Do you want to use a light theme or a dark theme? And I'll show you guys a couple of those examples in a second. And for really, you guys, we've gone through this already before, but thinking back to who is your app for? So the kind of like, if you think about a kid's app, I think like really bright, cool, fun, lots of different colors, kind of like red, orange, yellow, blue. Or sorry, red, orange, green, and blue, kind of like Google. But maybe for a music app like Spotify, let me show you. It's like a dark theme, right? It's like, okay, I'm cool, I'm listening to my music, like I'm in this experience, I'm underground, I'm at a concert. Like that's kind of what I think of when I think of Spotify. The other example is Hotel Tonight. So night kind of signifies darkness too, right? And this like they use a purple color for their main primary button color. And I'm cool, I like that vibe, it's interesting. So we want to make sure you choose your colors intentionally. So with Dropbox, they are a light color theme or light color scheme, and it's mostly because like their main primary color is blue, but I also think that people are using Dropbox, they just want to get to their information and find their files easily. And most of us are familiar with finding files on our computers, and most of them use a light color scheme as well. This is an example of a material design color palette, and it's pretty extensive. And you can see that the middle color is like an actual larger color, or actually taller than the rest of those other rectangles, is because that's the actual primary color. So what they're doing is basing off that primary color, it's going to be 10 shades lighter or 10 shades darker. But they are an app that is intended to serve countless products. So they have to have a lot of different color options. For us, we kind of want to make sure that you guys are not picking a bunch of different colors. Stick to one, maybe one lighter, maybe a couple darker shades than the one that you, from your actual primary color palette. So this is kind of a starting place, like I just said. Pick your color, which me and Sam really like this color blue, this like bright blue color. Pick a shade that's lighter, and you just use that lightness value in your HSL selector, and one darker value below it. And that's basically it for color. So Sam's going to talk about type.
Hey everybody, we're just going to do a quick primer on typography. We talked about this a little bit yesterday or last week. We're just going to get into a little bit more detail today. Has anybody seen serif and sans serif, these words before? In the back? Can you tell me what they mean? Does anybody know what they mean? Yeah, he said serif has the hooks on the letters. That's exactly right. If you zoom in, see that red rectangle, when you like zoom enhance on that, that is a serif. It's like a little foot sticking out, holding the font up. The glyph for letter. And if you look at like a serif typeface on the left, like in the New York Times or something, your eye's going to kind of be able to run across the bottom. All those little feet make it like a very clean line. So some people think that serif typefaces are a little easier to read. But we're used to printing serif on paper. Serifs have been around for a really long time. Until recently, though, screens didn't really have a lot of high resolution, so they were a little bit harder to read. Sans serif is sort of more modernist fonts, and they're a little easier to read on screens. They don't have little feet. We recommend generally when you're starting with typography to start with some sans serif fonts, but you can definitely use serif type for like headlines, titles, things that are really big. It'll be easier to read. Contrast is something else to consider when you're trying to figure out which kind of font you want to use. Let's zoom in on these guys again. These two A's. You can see, typography is originally these people writing with pens, right? And then eventually it was the printing press. Originally, actually, some of the fonts that you know that are on your computer were originally like knocked out with chisels and marble thousands of years ago. But often when you're writing with a pen, there's sort of like a thick side and a thin side. And the fonts on the right are sort of artifacts of how people used to draw shapes. On the left, it's a lot thicker. And again, on the screens, when you're working with really small things, generally less contrast, more evenly shaped letters are easier to read on screens. X height. Does anybody know what X height is? Yeah, what?
Oh, it's the middle height of the letters.
Yeah, it's literally the height of the X. So compared it basically to how tall the capital letters are, which is how tall all the letters are. On the left, we have X here and H. Now, you might say it's all about the same. Can anybody here tell me which of these has a taller X height? Is it obvious? It's a little hard to tell. Georgia's is a little bit taller. If you put up these bars here, you can sort of see. The red bars with like the thick line are the same. Georgia, you can see it goes to the top of that thick bar on the top. Garamond, it only goes to the bottom. And it might not really make a big difference in readability for these, but if you go to the next screen here, it's really small. You might be able to tell that Georgia on that screen is a little bit easier to read than the word Garamond. Fair to say? So it's a little bit tough to tell like how big an X height is when you're looking at a typeface, but that's a good guideline. Low contrast and tall X height when choosing typefaces. All right, if you're going to choose a typeface for your app, next choice is, all right, I've got a bunch of different options. Obviously, the ones come on my computer. Generally, there's some system typefaces that you want to stick with. If you're not really sure what to do, you really can't go wrong with these. Arial is pretty common on Windows computers, a lot of different computers. If you're working for Windows, it's a very clear typeface. It's really similar, actually, to Helvetica, which is the third one down, which is really common on Macs until recently, until they updated to Their font San Francisco, which is on Macs, iPhones, watches, Apple Watches. Roboto is the standard Android typeface. To be honest, they all kind of look the same up here. That's kind of on purpose. Like, these are tall X height, modern, fairly geometrical sans serif fonts. They don't have crazy slanted letters. They don't have really tiny thin parts. Legibility is probably your primary concern, especially when you're working in product. Okay, color of type is really important too. This is sort of a similar slide, but it's got a lot less contrast. Kelsey was just talking about contrast. There are a lot of really cool designs out there. In fact, Farmlogs has made this mistake before that look really, really dope, but the blacks aren't that black, and the lights are just a little bit gray, and it makes it really difficult for a lot of people to read the font. That's so much more clear, and we really encourage you guys to try to keep high contrast on all the type that you use. Here's an example of like just a practical way to do type lettering. So this is a very zoomed in version of that Arial slide I have here. The background is pure white. Usually when I'm setting type, I use like pure FFF if you're using hex color. The dark text you can see here is 220 on hue, so hue is like the rainbow. It's in the blue section. It's 30, so it's sort of saturated. You can see that's how far that dot in your sketch color picker is to the right. And it's pretty dark. It's pretty low in the black scale, so it isn't very high up. If you draw a line sort of between the bottom left of that color picker where it's pure black and upper right where it's pure blue, you can see we're pretty close to pure black, but we're working our way up towards blue. And generally this font, these colors look a little bit better than just pure black type. You can also see, I have this Arial headline here. If you were to draw that same line, you can see I'm a little bit closer to lighter gray. The contrast is pretty subtle between Arial and the word the here. But when you're looking to sort of create titles and distinguish different types of text in your app, say this is what a label is and this is the content of a piece of text, that's a good way to do it. Consider making those labels a little bit lighter. Another important part about type when you're working with like the color and feel of type is the character spacing here. So you can see spacing 0.2 for Arial there. We've made these small letters, and they're all caps, so we sort of space them out a little bit, and that's another sort of little trick that you can use if you try to make them look really nice. In addition to the fonts that come on your computer, there are a lot of really expensive fonts that you can buy. They tend to be a couple $100 for a single typeface. It can be much, much more than that. There's a great site called Typewolf if you want to see some fonts. There's also, what is that? I'll think of another one and set it up. There's another one like for fonts in the real world or something, fonts in use. But this is a great site that we use a lot. Just Google has a bunch of free fonts that are available for every web page, available to download. They're available for Figma users. You kind of get what you pay for. These are all free, so you got to be careful. Obviously, the one in the upper right doesn't really match what we talked about for product type, but Lato or Lato in the bottom right is a pretty common font for people to use. So is Open Sans in the bottom left, and the upper left, Roboto, all pretty common. And if you're interested in learning more about type, this is a pretty good book. Really deep history starting back in like the Middle Ages. It takes you all the way through these details. But if you're looking for something to put on your coffee table, The Elements of Typographic Style, Robert Bringhurst. Okay.